we're very keen for this conference to cast a wide net and certainly to look beyond the Anglo-Saxon environment. And as it happens, we've also started this year a big project pushing into Eastern Europe. We already have many wonderful connections in Latin America and the Spanish-speaking world, and also in China. But what's really growing for us now are connections in Eastern Europe. And in particular, over the last year or so, we made strong connections with the John Paul II Institute in Poland and the University of Warsaw. And I'm very pleased to say that we have two speakers now from the JPII Centre and Warsaw who've also been thinking a lot about the questions related to transhumanism and posthumanism. And my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Price, will give the formal introductions to the speakers. So thank you.
Thank you. The program might be a little confusing. It says with Jonathan Price, and it's 2 plenaries with 3 persons. So the way it will work is Michał Łuczewski, who's our Director of Programs at the John Paul II Centre, which is a cultural institute of the city of Warsaw, sending the message out of both the Pope and the philosopher who became the Pope, or philosopher, sociologist, playwright, etc. He will speak first, about a 20-minute presentation with 10 minutes or so for question and answer. And then Professor Agnieszka Nogal, who is Professor of Philosophy of Politics at the University of Warsaw, will give a similarly brief presentation of about 25 minutes. And then she and I will have a discussion here of some of the ideas. It'll be more of a political, philosophical approach to the impact of transhumanism on liberal democracy, after which point we will open up for another brief question and answer session. And finally, I'm Jonathan Price. I've had the pleasure of being at this university for the last 8 or 9 years, mostly associated with Blackfriars and now Oriel. And I'm glad to have you all here, and I hope that we can represent Warsaw well and the John Paul II Centre well, where I am now also a fellow seeking to internationalize the profile of the center. If you have any questions or interests in it, our website is not so useful in English yet. It's just 1 page, but in Polish it's more interesting, and I could answer any questions, or Michał, or Dominika Zukowska, who is just here, who's the director of our research institute. So, Michał, would you like to come and present?
First of all, let me express my joy for being here at that conference, and also in that city. It's a little bit like home for us, because Leszek Kołakowski, a great Polish intellectual who was expelled from Poland by the communist government in 1968, he found his home here in All Souls College, and I visited that college yesterday. So it's a little bit like home, and I'm very thrilled to be a part of that conference, and I want to express my gratitude for including JPII section. I would like to come back to year 1957 with 2 texts that are pertinent for our discussion. The first one, as all we know, is by Julian Huxley, when he coined the term transhumanism. I believe in transhumanism, he wrote. Once there are enough people who can truly say that the human species will be on the threshold of a new kind of existence, as different from ours as ours is from that of a pecking man, it will at last be consciously fulfilling its real destiny. This is one vista of the argument I would like to make. But then let me introduce the other person into that conversation. This is Erik Peterson, who was Carl Schmitt's main polemist and also a theological master of Joseph Ratzinger, who then became Benedict XVI. And in the same year, 1957, in his notes, he commented on the book by Günther Anders, The Obsolescence of Man. Those notes were entitled The Miracles of Antichrist. And this is what Erik Peterson writes. The obsolescence of man refers to what St. Paul called it, old man. However, the modern new man is not what was in Paul's mind. Rather, the modern new man is a technical homunculus who fires rockets towards the moon. It does not matter if their character is peaceful or not. For who nowadays is able to distinguish war from peace? And then he went on in one of his letters, trying to flesh out that idea. I'm trying to track down Antichrist. I think that such a search is the most authentic form of a Christian theology of history. Hitler's anti-Christian approach was an utter failure. Today, however, there is anti-Christianity that does not start anymore with what a man thinks, but with what a man actually does in technology, both in the East and in the West. I think it should be said, Antichrist, like Christ himself, will appear neither in the East nor in the West, neither here nor there, but he will be between us. And this being in between will surprise us. I'm beginning to understand the style of Tertullian, which is the style of those who have discovered Antichrist between us. So those two men framed the debate. This is debate whether we are entering a new age or we are entering an apocalypse. In theological terms, whether we are entering kingdom of God or we are entering the cross. It could frame the debate, but let me reframe that debate also a little bit more with Pius XII. And let us move to 1950. This is the Declaration of Apostolic Constitution, Munificentissimus Deus, defining the dogma of the Assumption. By the authority of our Lord, Jesus Christ, of the blessed apostles Peter and Paul, and by our own authority, we pronounce, declare, and define it to be a divinely revealed dogma, that the Immaculate Mother of God, the ever Virgin Mary, having completed the course of her earthly life, was assumed body and soul into heavenly glory. So what that declaration has in common with our theme of transhumanism? That formula, that Mary was assumed body and soul into heavenly glory, having completed the course of her earthly life, was to satisfy two sides of the debate between mortalists and immortalists. Mortalists would claim that Mary died, and only after she died, she was taken to heaven, while immortalists claimed that she didn't die and she just smoothly came from that existence here and on earth to existence with her son. So according to the mortalists, God willed the death of Mary precisely because of the intimacy of her association with her son, Jesus Christ. As is wonderfully expressed in the Byzantine liturgy for the Assumption, it was deeply appropriate that the mother should follow the paschal road taken by the son. The question is then, can you go to heaven without dying, even though you are the mother of God? The tradition agrees in general that Mary died, but even the immortalists claim that Mary's configuration to Christ crucified took place in her dolorous compassion on Calvary when she became the Queen of Martyrs. So we can rephrase that question. Can you reach the heavenly kingdom without the cross? Can you save your life without losing it? Or can you convert? I would like to take that question as the most important one. So can you save your life without losing it? The most important one for the debate on transhumanism. And I would like to have 3 steps, or 3 goals. To think about transhumanism as transformation of Christianity, as radicalization of modernity, and then briefly, what are the consequences of the transformation? And this is what I am to present is not just my work, but this is more broader work in the Center of John Paul II. And these are the journals we are engaged with. There's one journal, 40 and 4, when Jen actually published her paper. This is on messianic phase of transhumanism. The other is on the demonic origins of modernity. And with me, there's also, next to Jonathan, there's also Dominika, and also Franciszek Rakowski, who is, I don't see him, who is there, who is head of principal investigator at Samsung, and this is probably the biggest, one of the biggest in the world research institutes of Samsung, and he's working with actually enhancing cognitive and human capacities. This is one project we organized. It's called Courtyard of Gentiles. We organized it for Benedict XVI. We were endorsed. And one of 2 debates were devoted to the question of transhumanism. And then we inspired Vatican also to take that question seriously. And now our cardinals will be presenting during the synod that is devoted to the youth the question of transhumanism. So this is just to show that it's not me who is just presenting, but it's actually a collaborative, collective work that I'm about to present. What is the answer of Christianity to the question, can you save life without losing it? Answer is no. In theological terms, you have to die to save your life. In theological terms, after Bonaventure and Bernard of Clairvaux, we can say that there are 3 elements of vision, Catholic vision of transformation, Christian vision of transformation. This is formation, then there's deformation, and then there's transformation. We can phrase it in more, not necessarily theological terms. This is Babette's Feast, Cliff, a wonderful, wonderful film. And let me cite René Girard from his book, The Seed, Desire, and the Novel, who, without using that religious language, has the same insight. You have to die to resurrect. The hero triumphs in defeat. He triumphs because he is at the end of his resources. For the first time, he has to look his despair and his nothingness in the face. But this look, which he has dreaded, which is the death of pride, is his salvation. The conclusions of all the novels are reminiscent of an Oriental tale in which the hero is clinging by his fingertips to the edge of a cliff. Exhausted, the hero finally lets himself into an abyss. He expects to smash against the rocks below, but instead he is supported by the air. The law of gravity is annulled. And this is the description of conversion. Deception gives way to truth, anguish to remembrance, agitation to repose, hatred to love, humiliation to humility. Or you can take Leszek Kołakowski. This is The Presence of Myth, that was to be published in Poland in 1966, but the communists banned it from publishing, and then he could publish it only after he came to Oxford. We flee from anticipation of death, which is a source of suffering, to allow ourselves to be swallowed up totally in everyday immediacy. We flee from love, which is, or it can be a source of suffering, shackling ourselves in a forced cynicism towards the whole field of sexuality, and forced by fear to abandon those enrichments of life which in love are rarely achieved without pain. So that crucial insight can be also represented with thinkers who were at that time when they were writing it secular. Or you can, just one sentence, you can say that you can be surprised by joy. And probably the most important thing is that to be surprised, because you cannot expect joy. You have to be surprised with joy. So in some sense, you have to die to be surprised with joy. So this is the overall Christian vision of an answer to that question: can you save your life without losing it? And now let me go to the second point. What is the answer of transhumanism? And the answer of transhumanism, although it's, as we know, it's a very broad term, will be radicalization of modernity. And I would say that there is implicit answer that you can save your life without dying. That will be probably the biggest point of divergence between Christian worldview and transhumanist worldview, although they are, of course, very linked with one another. And let me briefly just show several characteristics of radicalization of modern worldview. And I'm drawing here on Reinhart Koselleck, also one of Schmidt's students. He showed that modernity, and that was a very influential vision, by the way, it was then taken up by Jürgen Habermas and Paul Ricoeur, that modernity consists in many characteristics. One of them is temporalization of evil. So evil becomes temporal, not metaphysical quality. And even evil is moved to the past. So it's not something that befits us here and now or will come in the future. It's something that can be temporalized, can be contained in the past. And we can separate ourselves from the past. We are, in modern times, we are future-oriented. So there's no apocalypse anymore. Future becomes the source of legitimacy. So expectations are more important than traditions and are more important than experience. And one important characteristic is that worldviews are articulated in words and concepts. And transhumanism is a very interesting concept because this is a typical modernism. And if you take modern concepts, liberalism, republicanism, what does it mean that there is ism? It means that they are abstract. So on the one hand, there are many branches of transhumanism, but on the other hand, there's one transhumanism that is able to, as if be an umbrella term for all those transhumanisms. So it's an abstraction. Then that abstraction can be politicized, can be ideologized, and can be used to mobilize, like communism, like republicanism, like liberalism. So those characteristics go hand in hand. On the one hand, they are abstract, but on the other hand, that abstraction of the concept allows the concept to be a mobilizing concept. And we can see, and we can see it with Bostrom probably. They are mobilizing. And last but not least, modernity, what is characteristic for modernity, this is what Koselleck call disposability of history. History can be produced, it can be molded. There's no providence. It can be just used and reused and recycled. And then there's that feeling when we are molding history of acceleration of time and of revolution that cannot be reverted. And modernity and transhumanism is radicalizing that characteristics of modernity. I'm sure that you know two of them. You don't know probably the middle figure. One is Hegel, of course, and he is important because all those processes that were described are to be found in his historiosophy, philosophy of history. The other is Marx, and the second is August Cieszkowski, who was a link between them. He was the founder of philosophy of action, Philosophie der Tat, and he was probably one of the very first, one could say, transhumanists. At least he was going into that direction. He introduced the concept historiosophy. So whenever you are using the concept of historiosophy, this is his coinage. And he was thinking that we are entering in the period of transition, so transitio. And modeling after division of history after Joachim of Fiore, he said that we are entering the third phase, the phase of the spirit. And interestingly, he uses the word posthuman and transhuman, but also as a technical term, he uses the word ultra-humanitarian. And he's describing man in one of his work, that is a messianic work, by the way. This is interpretation of Paternoster. The man indeed finds in his nature the urge and the desire to abolish the state of nature. We are entering the third final epoch for mankind. If this epoch will be completed, the moment will come for transhuman developments, the moment of overcoming of the history of humanity. The humanity will reach its absolute end and will get into a higher state, which we can call angelic. This is what we, the humanity, could not proclaim today, but we can anticipate and expect. It is ultra-humanitarian mystery. This future is not more human, but ultra-humanitarian. He is one of the representatives of Hegelian philosophy of history, but he's radicalizing that philosophy of history to foresee the future and to foresee the future of mankind that will be moved beyond the shackles, so to speak, of humanity. And let me in several broad strokes, finish my presentation. So Cieszkowski, and I think after him, when you still have in mind that quotation by Huxley, you see how similar they are. So it is as if there are some more powerful worldviews that are speaking through us, than this is us who are molding the worldviews. So Cieszkowski is imagining the world of angels that will not be confined by their human limits. But whenever there are angels, there are those who are not angels. And whenever there are those superhumans who are free, there are those who are left behind. There are those who are victims. Blade Runner was mentioned here several times. And I would like to refer to Blade Runner to flesh out in the final minutes I have my argument. So in modernity, we become more and more abstract. The experience of evil and the experience as such is neutralized. We use those abstract terms to describe reality, and this is why we have to come back to poetry or to come back to films to have that feeling of experience, to understand something that is just beyond abstract terms, beyond abstract words. Nick Bostrom was mentioned here several times. I want to take one of his policy papers to show how abstract we become, and this is why I'm then coming back to Blade Runner. So in his policy paper, he writes, imagining that transhuman future, human embryo selection would significantly increase world human capital. Research into the consequences of ethics or of embryo selection could better prepare policymakers to decide whether it is desirable to accelerate or delay this technology and to develop appropriate regulatory frameworks. And it's interesting because you can accelerate or delay, but you cannot stop. So this is like typical modern vision of history. So the modern revolution cannot be stopped. It can be only a little bit delayed. In the context of thinking about long-term futures, the possibility of genetic enhancement through the application of existing technologies should make technological stagnation seem less likely. Countries that take a negative view may worry about losing international competitiveness, while immigration and so on and so forth. So he is describing selection of embryos in very abstract terms, so completely dehumanizing human embryos. So it shows that when we are imagining that future that will be angelic future, at the same time, there are those who are just not seen or left behind. At the same time, I would say there are victims that we don't want to take into consideration. And at one point in another paper, Bostrom refers to the so-called Hail Mary pass. So he imagines that artificial intelligence can turn against humans, and what then? He says that we should think about Hail Mary pass for that artificial intelligence. And what does it mean? It means that in the Hail Mary approach, he writes, we would try to give the artificial intelligence a goal that would make the artificial intelligence want to follow the lead of other hypothetical artificial intelligence that might exist in the multiverse. So he imagines that we can build a mechanism into intelligence that will seek another intelligence that will tell that first intelligence not to attack humans. A very interesting sci-fi vision. But he uses that very interesting term, Hail Mary pass, and it's, of course, from Notre Dame, but also from Catholic, from the source of Catholicism. And Blade Runner is a film about Hail Mary pass. But this is quite a different Hail Mary pass Bostrom imagines. This is a Hail Mary pass of Roy Batty. We have all seen that film, so I won't retell the story. And the story of Roy Batty is the story of transformation. He sees formation, he sees deformation, and last but not least, he witnesses to transformation. And this is that Hail Mary pass. There is a war of all against all, and there are no differences between humans and replicants. They are fighting with one another, so they are like warring brothers. This is one of them, Leon Kowalski, probably of Polish origins, one replicant. But that replicant is the most important one. So Roy Batty, the most superb of all replicants, who is chasing Blade Runner, played by Harrison Ford, Deckard. This is one of the last scenes of of that film. And you can see the gradual transformation of Roy Batty. First, he is part and parcel of that war of all against all. He's about to kill the designer of his eyes, Dr. Chu, and he says, after Blake, "Fiery the angels fell, deep thunder rolled around their shores, burning with the fires of work." He is referring here to the story of falling angels, and he could say that the world has fallen, but he changes one word. He changes the word from rose to fell, because in Blake's original America prophecy, there are fiery the angels rose, and he says fiery the angels fell. So he includes himself in the fall. So it's not only the world that falls, but it's also him who falls, and he sees that he is deformed as the world is deformed around him. So he's part of that story. Then, in the end of that story, he is chasing Descartes. He is about to kill him, but in a quite unexpected, surprising manner, he saves his life. Descartes is, one could say, falling off the cliff, but then Roy Batty is taking him by his hand. And this is the moment of transformation. This is the moment when Batty is at the hour of his death, and when Descartes is also at the hour of his death. But at the very moment, they are resurrected. They are surprised with joy. And when you see the dove, this is the clear indicator that it's not the end of Roy Batty. So there's that feeling of immortality. And when he dies, he says, "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the darkness of Tannhäuser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain, time to die. I don't know why he saved my life." This is what Descartes comments. "Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before. Not just his life, anybody's life, my life. All he wanted were the same answers the rest of us want. Where did I come from? Where I'm going? How long have I got? All I could do was to sit here and watch him die." So the answer of artificial intelligence to the question of can you survive, can you save your life without dying is no. So you have to die to become human in that sense. And in the final instance, the hero triumphs in defeat. He triumphs because he is at the end of his resources. For the first time, he has to look his despair and his nothingness in the face. But this look, which he has dreaded, which is the death of pride, is his salvation. And I wanted to show here also the answer to the questions of transhumanism. The answer to the question of transhumanism is not otherism, it's not supranaturalism or whatever. It's the experience, and this is also conversion, the conversion that takes place in our life. Thanks a lot.